Now,
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:06 this Thursday morning in your nation's capital. We're almost to the weekend, but we've got a lot of work to do here. The administration won't sleep. Why should we? I mean, the new administration, the current administration, they've been sleeping for a while. Thanks for joining us. Coming up at 6:35, we're going to speak with James Robinson. You know, there's a lot going on internationally. James is with the Institute of World Politics. He's the Dean of Academics there. We're going to talk about the latest. There's been a missile launch from Russia to Ukraine. Things have escalated just in time for the transition. Then at 7:05, Representative Andy Biggs will join us. Coming up at 7:35, Dina Griffiths, Loudoun County School Board. Apparently a physical altercation out in Loudoun County involving Dina Griffiths. Then at 8:05, KT McFarland will give us her perspective on all of the world events going on and national security concerns. And then at 8:35, your Attorney General of Virginia, Jason Miyares. All that coming up. Joining us all morning long is your next Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Mercedes Schlapp. Good morning, Mercedes. What?
Wait, I didn't realize that you already had announced my candidacy.
I know.
I mean, what are you doing?
Surprise.
Are you going to just throw it out there on X as well, and let's just stir up
Let's just
the
see what
mix?
happens. Winsome Sears is running for governor. Jason Miyares is running for re-election for Attorney General. That means the one slot open statewide in Virginia is Lieutenant Governor. So,
well, why don't you move to Virginia and run? You'd be such a better
I am
candidate.
happy
You're
to-
already the ambassador of wine
I'm
country.
happy to be
for
the wine
crying out
country
loud.
ambassador and leave it at that.
You know, can I just make a note on
course.
that? I am so relieved that they figured it out in Virginia, that there's not going to be a primary. That would have really hurt the process, and even in terms of fundraising.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that Winsome Sears and Jason Miyares, both top-notch individuals. So I'm really excited for them in their in this next journey. And
Agreed.
CPAC will be there to back them up day one to make sure Virginia basically, you know, goes Republican.
Well, and the CPAC stamp of approval certainly has had a good fall of 2024, for crying out loud. Not only the elections, but Mercedes, I got to ask you, I know that you guys were down at Mar-a-Lago. You did a special CPAC event down there. You were down there quite a bit interacting with the transition team and with the president-elect, and I'm glad to have you this morning. Give me your assessment. First of all, just in terms of the process down there compared to the first administration, the first Trump administration, they are moving at lightning speed and filling these cabinet positions.
Yeah. Well, first, I missed everybody on WMAL. It's been a whirlwind since the election, but I will tell you, being down there in Mar-a-Lago was just so fascinating. The president is definitely, like you mentioned, warp speed mode, very focused on what he needs to get done. I think one of the messages that I got clearly was the fact that he wants new blood into the administration. So while he has some picks, but I would say very, very few picks from the previous administration, he's really made a move to find just new creative thinkers in this space.
Yeah.
And he wants strong loyalist people who understand that they have to move quickly in terms of implementing his agenda, because you realize that in Washington, once you go into power, you start losing your political capital pretty quickly. I would say into the first or second year of office. So a lot has to get done, especially in those first 100 days. And so, you know, I think he really wanted to just have very creative, unique picks for his administration. I will say, what I have noticed from the outside, he wants a communicators cabinet. He wants people who could articulate his message, and then although they might not be in depth in terms of, you know, that particular topic, that they're able to, you know, basically deliver President Trump's message, and that President Trump is really the one running the show.
Yeah, I think that's a very wise observation. He certainly picked people who are good at communicating, who even have TV experience in some cases, but they're also fighters. It's not just about communicating. It's being able to weather the storm that is going to be thrown at you and then fight back, fight back, fight back. You also talk about being able to get stuff done. And the announcement last night that Russ Vought, it appears, will be returning. It's one of the few returns. You know, you just said new blood, new blood. But for director of OMB, which I think you'd agree, Mercedes, being in this town and working for a couple of administrations, director of OMB is kind of the unspoken workhorse of a White House. If you've got a good director of Office of Management and Budget, you're going to be able to get things done and get it done quickly. And especially if Donald Trump is serious, and I think he is, about cutting, get rid of the bureaucratic machine, the Leviathan that has been built in this town, and removing the administrative state. You need somebody at OMB. Russ Vought already knows it. He's been there. He can start on day one.
Look, I had the honor of working with Russ Vought. I always thought he was one of the smartest people in the room by far. And let's be real. We have been going in Congress. They've been voting continuing resolution, after continuing resolution in terms of just making sure our government gets funded. Mm-hmm. And remember, we've had the showdowns of shutting down the government, back when I was at the White House in 2017. And so now we have a Senate majority and a House majority. And so because you only need the 50 votes basically for budget reconciliation, you are going to be able to pass these budgets. So that's going to be huge for the president. And it's an opportunity for them to figure out in each of these departments, what can we cut? What waste can we cut? Now, I will warn you, then the media is going to come back and say, they cut this vital program that does X, Y, Z. I mean, that's where they're going to go with this. But because of Congress having the power of the purse, because of the fact that you have a very competent OMB director, and then you've got Doge in the middle of it all with Elon and Vivek, which was, I got to tell you, just a colorful story here.
Please.
Matt, when we had gone down to Mar-a-Lago, Matt had a chance to talk to Elon. So Matt felt like he was explaining to Elon how the government works, which was really kind of fascinating. and so, the idea
I think I'd like to get that class from Matt. I've got some questions. He should.
I thought you wanted the class from Elon on how to launch a rocket. But
no,
that's
I know my lane.
So I think, for Elon and Vivek to bring in, well, what do we do to cut, right? Where do we go to cut? But we also have to be aware that now with Russ there, he's going to be able to explain, look, these are going to be the consequences if you cut X, Y, Z. And they also have to plan for kind of the PR component of this as well as you move into this process. Because now it's, we're in the honeymoon phase, but we all know how this works. Once you get in there, it's a whole different monster.
Wait, this is the honeymoon?
Lot of pushback.
This is the honeymoon with the leaks and not from the Trump transition team and the Trump campaign have been. No, I'm talking about the Justice Department leaking stuff about different. Matt Gaetz, about the people's hair on fire. It's quite a honeymoon. I'm glad they're thinking in those terms, knowing and anticipating the fallout that they're going to have and the political fights they're going to have for all of the cuts that they need to make. And hopefully they'll be able to, and I have full confidence they will be able to communicate it properly, saying, okay, so here's what we're cutting and here's why we're cutting it. Because number one, a bulk of what this function or department or division or whatever the hell it is doing is already done by 3 other departments in the government, right? Number one. Number two, the states all have their own programs that are doing this. So if the argument from Congress is to fund the states program, then we can just do that with block grants to the states to do these things. We don't need this giant bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. to manage it and control it. And number three, we're cutting it because this isn't the function of the government. And we shouldn't be in this business. It'll get done elsewhere. And they can clearly lay that out. Again, they're not going to convince George Stephanopoulos or Jake Tapper. That's not their job. They just need to give us, we the people who want this to happen, some sort of ammunition to work with so we can understand it and we can properly articulate it as well.
There's a clear mandate from the American people of what they want. They want a stronger economy. They want no more wars. They want a controlled border. They approve on the deportation plan that President Trump is putting forward. So the mandate is clear, and they approve of Donald Trump's stance. I mean, those are the main things right now. Come on, let's be real.
So that's Russ Vought. There's another couple of announcements yesterday. One of them in particular, sort of a good friend of this program and certainly a friend of CPAC. That'd be Matt Whitaker as ambassador to NATO. I want to talk about that in a moment. And some of the slots that still have to be filled and the current status of what could very well be a contentious confirmation process for a handful of these nominees. We'll get into all of that with a real insider and an outsider, Mercedes Schlapp. She's with us all morning, and we'll talk. I just mean you're an insider, but you're not so inside that you can't sit here with us all morning and talk about this stuff. So
that's right.
It's the perfect, you are in the sweet spot. 5:15. That's my new nickname for you. Mercedes Sweet Spot.
To the news.
Live
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
We've been lamenting here on O'Connor and Company that as the Trump cabinet forms, we have to reset and reload our Rolodex here because so many of them are frequent guests, if not actual friends of this program. I can't imagine what it's like for you at CPAC there, Mercedes, for you and Matt, because yesterday's announcement of Matt Whitaker as the ambassador to NATO. Matt Whitaker, of course, a former U.S. attorney out of Iowa, also former acting attorney general during the time between Bill Barr and Attorney General Sessions. And he was on short lists for a lot of major positions. And that's a serious, serious job. I know a lot of people joke, oh, you're going to move to Belgium and eat waffles and chocolate. No, ambassador to NATO is an incredibly important job. And again, he's a great communicator. We have him on the program on legal issues, on various important controversies here in Washington. And as you know, the media likes to claim that Donald Trump is going to set fire to NATO and tear down all our relationships there. I'm looking forward to Matt Whitaker actually furthering the Trump agenda for foreign policy there and representing our country in Belgium, and at the same time communicating properly exactly what we are doing and what we're not doing.
And at the same time eating chocolates.
Lots of waffles and chocolates.
Waffles. So, look, Matt Whitaker is a personal friend of ours. As you know, he's been just such a great friend and obviously on the board of CPAC. And he understands his marching orders, and he will be tough. He will understands the challenges that are happening in NATO. And I think, NATO for so long until President Trump came into power the first time around would spend U.S. money. Like we were the ones always funding NATO at such a high percentage. And President always talked about, the fair share. You got to pay your fair share at NATO. And so I think Matt Whitaker will be such a strong power player in that role. So we're really proud of him. I do have to say that the Washington Post put out just less than a week ago that Trump's cabinet is CPAC's fantasy league. And it's true. It's like all these people who have been with us at CPAC. So, Larry, that means your appointment should be coming up soon. I'm trying to figure out what you'd be. That'd be fun.
I've got a couple of ideas. Also, it was announced yesterday that Dr. Marty Makary of Johns Hopkins, again, a friend of this program, frequent guest on this program, an outspoken critic, I'll use the word critic, of Dr. Fauci, the CDC, and a lot of decisions that were made during the pandemic. And by the way, his media presence, as well as his very smart intelligence and well-sourced articles in the Wall Street Journal, shaped policy and held Anthony Fauci and the CDC in check when nobody else was. He has courage. He's never been debunked on any of the positions that he's had, on the bad decisions that were made during COVID. It's rumored now that he is on the short list to head up the FDA, and I think that's a
I did see that.
Fantastic choice.
Again, strong communicator, right? You've seen him on TV. He's been very vocal about these COVID mandates and in just asking very basic questions on the decisions being made during the time of the COVID pandemic. Mm-hmm. So look, I love him. President Trump is looking at rebels. He's picking people that are going to ask the questions in the agencies of what they're spending their time on, what they're doing, getting rid. I mean, we know this. A lot of these offices, some have very great people, but a lot of them just, you don't really know what they're doing other than collecting a paycheck.
Yes and no, he's looking at rebels. I mean, Marco Rubio is not a rebel at the State Department. All right.
Well,
and I'm
he's
still
not going to get them all right.
Somewhat skeptical about that pick. Nothing against Senator Rubio. I get it. You tell me Marco Rubio's entire political history, and I'm pretty familiar with it, and then say, where do you think he'd end up in a cabinet? State is not sort of at the top of that list. But
he's been on the Senate Intelligence Committee. He's been on the Foreign Affairs Committee. He does. I do have to
You
say.
just said he's
has,
picking rebels to shake things up.
Okay,
And
mostly, I
right.
should say.
Well, and what about
Mostly.
FBI director? I keep hearing that Mike Rogers is being strongly considered for.
He is being strongly
He's from
considered.
the inside. First of all, he was at the FBI. Then he was a
Why
congressman.
are you arguing with me? I'm not making these picks.
I'm not
Larry.
arguing
Like,
with you. I'm arguing
if
with
it would
this
be you and I
decision.
as president and vice president, we might go in different
I
directions.
think we would
you know,
definitely go
I don't
into-
know.
But Mike
I would've gone-
Mike Rogers is the
So
furthest
can
thing
I
from
give
a
you
rebel.
the Marco
Mike
Rubio
Rogers
part
was
of
part
this?
of the problem with the Russian collusion investigation. Mike Rogers thought it was a bad idea to strip James Clapper and John Brennan of their security clearance after they participated in the Russian collusion hoax after they had left power. The first thing that an FBI director should do is to go in there and fix some of the problems, and Mike Rogers was part of those problems. I'm sorry, no offense to Mr. Rogers. He's a good Michigander. Would have been great if he won his Senate race, but being director of the FBI is not a consolation prize. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we can't end up with these people that their first and foremost is going to be like, just go after the president.
Right.
I mean,
Or
the
protect
amount
the
of
institution
energy,
from the president. I think Mike Rogers will think, well, my job is to make sure that the FBI is protected from the things that Trump wants to do. Wrong. That's not your job at all. Your job is to do what the president wants to do. Sorry.
Are you done ranting?
I'm really fired up about this. I can't believe they're really considering
Well,
it.
listen, I agree. I think the president should pick Kash Patel. Kash Patel, we worked very closely with Congressman Nunes, and they did a lot of work together, you know, to basically say this Russian hoax is not real. Think about the energy, the money spent, the stress, the fact that it was they completely botched this whole entire investigation to try to take down Donald Trump, one of many attempts by the FBI. And then you have to wonder, like, for the FBI, their reputation is so bad. Like, they need someone who's going to understand what their real role is, which is, let's stop going after domestic terror, you know, calling parents domestic terrorists, and go after Catholics who go to Latin Mass.
Yes.
And this whole like extreme
That's the
type of agenda. I
priority.
mean, it's ridiculous how the FBI has been politicized. And I just think Kash Patel, he has the experience. I think he understands what needs to get done. And I think it would be, you know, I think it would be smart of the president to pick Kash Patel in this role.
When you said we're president and vice president, which was which?
I'm definitely president.
Yeah, it's Mercedes and company there at the White House. 524.
Now,
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
5:36 as we move along here on this Thursday morning. Coming up at 6:35, we're going to speak with James Robbins, talk about the latest out of Moscow and a missile launch there. He's with the Institute of World Politics. Also at 7:05, Representative Andy Biggs will be joining us. We're going to talk about these unaccompanied children that are missing in this country right now, crossing the border illegally. Then Dina Griffiths joins us at 7:35, member of the Loudoun County School Board. 8:05, KT McFarland will give us her perspective on the Trump cabinet and also national security issues happening here in the final days of the Biden administration. And then we'll wrap things up at 8:35 with Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares. Attorney General, those in the know call him. That's Mercedes Schlepp right there. Talk about being in the know. Mercedes Schlepp, thanks for being here this morning.
I'm starting to feel like Joan Rivers or something, you know, like the one.
Why?
You know, and finding out all the like information. She was more gossiping.
Oh,
I
no,
don't do
yeah,
gossip.
absolutely. You know, you've got all the tea. That's what we should start calling this.
All the tea.
Thursday tea with Mercedes Schlepp.
Thursday. Ooh, that'd be fun.
You know,
That'd
people
be
are
fun. Can I
aligning.
just take over your show? Is that the plan?
People are aligning against Tulsi Gabbard as the prospective director of national intelligence. And by the way, again, CPAC connection. Tulsi Gabbard's first public appearance in any sort of conservative forum was as the keynote speaker at the Reagan dinner at CPAC. I believe it was in Orlando, 3 years ago, I want to say, or 2 years ago?
Well,
it's all a blur.
You were actually hosting the dinner.
I was.
So you were the MC
I
for
made
the
a
dinner.
joke. She was at the table right in front, and I said, I'm excited that Tulsi Gabbard's here to make the conservative case for socialized medicine. And
Exactly.
she laughed the biggest laugh and she gave me a thumbs up. And I was making fun of the fact that here she's gone from Bernie Sanders' political positions to suddenly a coming out moment at CPAC. And that speech that she gave has sort of started a chain of events that now has led her first of all, disavowing the Democratic Party, leaving the party completely, and now as the potential director of national intelligence. And I want to remind everybody, as you hear these horrific things said about her, that she's some sort of spy and a asset for the Russian government, that she is still an active duty officer in the United States Army. You know, to be an officer, you've got to have either secret or top secret clearance at least. And I'm thinking that this may have come up during that process if this were true.
No, that and the fact that it's Nikki Haley really going after her hard. I mean, she's the one that's made these comments about Tulsi Gabbard, basically saying that she's tied to terrorist regimes.
Well, let's listen to it. Yeah.
Okay.
The latest attack comes from Nikki Haley.
She went to Syria in 2017 for a photo op with Bashar al-Assad while he was massacring his own people. She said she was skeptical that he was behind the chemical weapons attacks. Now, this to me is disgusting because, Cheney, you and I were at the United Nations when Assad did those chemical attacks on those children. Yep. And you can go back and look at a speech I gave holding up pictures of dead children who had been killed by chemical attacks.
Yep, choked to death.
For her to say that Assad was not behind that. Literally, everything she said about that were Russian talking points. Every bit of that. That was Russian propaganda. After Russia invaded Ukraine, Tulsi Gabbard literally blamed NATO. Our Western alliance that's responsible for countering Russia, she blamed NATO for the attack on Ukraine. And the Russians and the Chinese echoed her talking points and her interviews on Russian and Chinese television.
All right, there's a little bit more to this. First of all, and by the way, this is from Nikki Haley's Sirius XM satellite radio show, which sounds honestly like scintillating radio. Really worth your time.
I mean, would you really listen to this? Seriously,
man. But I will say,
maybe to help you go to sleep.
As someone who does a news talk radio program that emphasizes politics and issues like Nikki Haley, the ambassador to the UN former, is doing here, it's something I should give her a little lesson here. Because when you say, and then she said this, and then she said that, what we do here on this program, Mercedes, is we then play the audio so you can hear directly from Tulsi Gabbard's mouth.
That's right.
How she sympathizes with Bashar al-Assad or says things that are in support of Russia and Putin. I mean, it would have been so easy for them to do that. I wonder why. You know, that's the funny thing where they say, well, she said this about this and she said that. But nobody's showing the clips. No one's showing me when Tulsi Gabbard did that. And I'm open. I'd love to learn. I want to see if she did that sort of thing. And then I would say, well, Tulsi Gabbard, what did you mean by this? And do you still share this opinion? But they don't even do that much.
Well, there's one of the individuals. I don't. He's Will Chamberlain. I don't know him. I don't know him well.
Will Chamberlain was an NBA great. He played for the 76ers and then the late.
No. I actually follow him on Twitter.
Oh, Will Chamberlain. That's a very different person. I don't know.
Will Chamberlain.
Yeah. Right.
Senior counsel for actually Article 3 project. That's Mike Davis's project. He says it's interesting. Her confirmation hearings will be really interesting. This is talking about Tulsi Gabbard. Mm-hmm. I suspect that Tulsi's view on Iran, for example, have changed in the last 4 years, especially since October 7th. And then he goes on to say, I also think her being a skeptic on Iran, Russia, China, Syria is a massive feature, not a bug. We want a skeptical DNI because if she is persuaded by intelligence against these countries, the rest of us can be confident that it's as serious as she says, rather than some neocon BS. And this is the thing, right? So remember, Nikki comes from the neocon world. It's like a Liz Cheney, philosophy of the Republican Party. And really on the MAGA front, they've moved away from the neocons, for the most part.
Yeah.
I still think, it's for the most part, they moved away from that. So look, the woman Tulsi's very qualified to take on this job. She will ask the tough questions. She understands clearly who our enemies are. She's going to be part of a bigger, there's so many components when it comes to the intelligence agencies. And quite frankly, some of these intelligence agencies have gone rogue. I mean, they've gone after American citizens, like involved in the Trump campaign back in 2016. I mean, let's be real.
Right. Well, and this is the problem because a lot of us look at the position of Director of National Intelligence and the intelligence community, and sadly, because of the behavior of people within those communities over the last several years, our main focus is to get them out of domestic politics, spying on us and using information that they gather on us, rightly or wrongly, or fraudulent information, and lying to the American people for political purposes. And Exhibit A is what they did with the Hunter Biden laptop story. How do those 51 people still have security clearance and have any kind of reputation within the intelligence community? So sadly, we hear about the position of Director of National Intelligence, and we want someone that's going to fix that problem. And we've lost sight of the fact that the Director of National Intelligence actually is a vital position in our national security, preventing wars, preventing terror attacks, preventing subversive actions from our enemies. And because members of the intelligence community have undermined their own reason for being and their own power, I'm emphasizing more what she can do to clean the mess up. So you're going to hear more from Nikki Haley here as she continues to say what
let's not.
No, we got to hear it,
No,
and
kidding.
because
Go
we're
ahead.
going to get ready for these confirmation hearings, and this is the attack on Tulsi Gabbard, and I think it's worth knowing exactly what they're going to say. By the way, we'd love to have Ms. Gabbard on, Congresswoman Gabbard, Colonel Gabbard on the show so she can speak about this as well. She might. You're guessing she'll do a...
Can I tell you just from the insider's perspective, none of our nominees right now are going to be talking to anybody.
They're not doing any media.
So they'll be down. There is no this. This is like what they do. They hunker down,
and
through
get
the
ready for confirmation.
hearings.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah, that's what they got to do.
It's 5:44.
Push for dropping charges against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange and pardoning National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden, both whom were accused of leaking highly sensitive U.S. secrets that put Americans in danger. She called for Trump to end the destructive trade war with China. So now she's defended Russia, she's defended Syria, she's defended Iran, and she's defended China. Now, she has not denounced any of these views. None of them. She hasn't taken one of them back. DNI, Department of National Intelligence, this is not a place for a Russian, Iranian, Syrian, Chinese sympathizer.
Wow.
DNI has to analyze real threats.
She is sympathizer. She's using terms, that go back to the McCarthy era to call her a sympathizer for. And yes, she is a Democrat. I mean, those. By the way, that's the funny thing. You could actually sum up all those positions by saying she was a Democrat, because those were positions that the majority of the Democrats in Congress held.
Right. So look, this is kind of an interesting conversation, Larry, that really we should be having with wonderful red wine, but that's a different story.
Well, we're going to have it with wonderful KT McFarland coming up later in the program.
That is true.
We got a lot of national security focus here on the show today. Go ahead.
Can I just say, so here's the deal. So it's the deeper philosophy of where the Republican Party is going to fall when it comes to foreign policy, right? So there's always a sense of Trump being the isolationist and in terms of America first and et cetera. And then you've got the neocons as part of this, as part of the discussion, which I think there's been a complete rejection of the neocons in the Republican Party. It has happened. And then the Democrats, I think, they've had the colossal failure on the international level because they play footsie with the adversaries like China, like Iran, in the case of really being pro-Hamas. And so I do think that Tulsi has had a conversion towards more of this. Look, we got to be tough on Iran. We got to be tough on China. We got to be tough on Russia. Yeah. I think, but no need of going into war. And look, she's not going to be making the decisions of going to war or not. That will be Pete Hegseth.
Well, that's the thing.
But,
I mean, DNI is.
Real.
There is policy involved in that position, but not on the issues that Ambassador Haley is bringing up here.
No, this is collecting, intelligence information. Right. Obviously,
but you direct a major budget, and you're able to prioritize exactly where that budget is being spent on, what intelligence gathering you're going to do. She's also going to be in charge of what gets declassified or not, which I think that's why there's a lot of these neocons who are scared about this and concerned about her jumping in here. But can we just take a step back here? The Nikki Haleys of the world who have been running our foreign policy for so long, who Joe Biden would approve of, and George Stephanopoulos would approve of, and the Mike Rogers of the world would approve of, for that matter. and the Jeb Bushes of the world would approve of. Let's just be clear. Where have they led us being in charge?
Yeah.
Let me just check this morning's headlines. Russia launches first intercontinental ballistic missile at Ukraine. The powerful weapon is capable of striking targets thousands of kilometers away. An escalation in the Russia-Ukraine war brought about by decisions made by Joe Biden and all of the experts approved of by Nikki Haley.
Yes.
They've now escalated this war in the final weeks of this hapless, failed administration. So it can be handed off to Donald Trump to clean up the mess that could be, 1 second away from World War III. So I recognize that Nikki Haley is not happy with the credentials and the past statements of Tulsi Gabbard. I think based on that, she should probably put together her own presidential campaign and challenge Donald Trump to, oh, wait, no, she did that. She did that already.
Did that.
And her own
Yeah.
party said we're not
I guess I'm
interested in
trying to
going that
figure out-
direction.
I'm trying to figure out who's Nikki's crowd. Is it just Liz Cheney listening to her podcast?
Yeah.
Is
Well,
that the only person?
I'll tell you. Well, it's funny you should. And again, I'm the last person to criticize someone else with a big satellite radio contract, whatever that might look like. But Nikki Haley delivering this monologue that you just heard a little bit of. They have cameras now in the studio at Sirius. Radio stations are doing that now for video enhancement to their programming. And she was reading this. This with these talking points.
Really? So she's not even like us that we're like on the whim all the time. Like there's no talking points for us.
All of this was laid out for her to convey. This was a planned, coordinated monologue specifically to target Tulsi Gabbard and to sort of lay down the marker for her confirmation hearings. Every single talking point that she delivered, expect to hear them repeated on both sides of the aisle in the Senate. It's going to be a fascinating confirmation process. Like I said,
Wow.
we've got James Robbins joining us at 6:35 to discuss